Okay, so we are recording. So again, thank you so much for being here today. We're so grateful. My name is Heather Wagner. I serve as the Director of Student Engagement and Campus Life here at Virginia Tech. And I am thrilled to have Thomas Miller, who is the Chair of the Student Life Council and a task force member, an excellent task force member for the Task Force on the Future of Student Governance. We're also joined by Miles Guth, who is the Student Government Association President. And these two fine students are going to explain where we're going and all about the Undergraduate Student Senate. So I am going to pass it over to the two of you for what I know will be a great presentation.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, thank you everyone for that's here today, and for those that might be watching the recording as it pulled out. I'll share my screen right now. There we go. So the presentation we're going to give today is it's a little bit about the transition from SGA currently to what is going to be called the Undergraduate Student Senate. I'll pass it off to Miles to kind of get us introduced to the bigger picture, and then I'll talk a little bit about the structure in more detail as we go forward.
Yeah, all right. So, hey, everyone, good afternoon. My name is Miles Guth. Like Heather said, I serve as the Student Government Association President, and I'm really happy to be with you guys today sharing all of this about the Undergraduate Student Senate. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, this entire process, all of the Undergraduate Student Senate transition from SGA to USS is all part of the 5-Senate university structure restructuring of governance that's going on that was originally started by President Sands and the President's Committee on Governance. So this is one branch of the 5-Senate structure that will become the new future of governance at Virginia Tech. So one of the big questions is, why are we here today presenting, and what is this all about? So the structure and the idea we're presenting today has 3 overarching goals for USS. Consolidation of student groups into one unified voice, increasing participation and outreach, and a truly representative body for every constituency and identity group at Virginia Tech. And those are sort of the 3 key pillars that we're trying to hold up in the USS with this new structure. The bottom line here, and it says on the slide, is we want to make USS accessible, approachable, and representative. And we're really going to keep that in mind as we go through our transition process and build the foundations of this new body. So another big question, what is the fundamental work of the USS? What are we going to be doing with our time? So the USS is going to be the most idealistic voice of the university, and we think this charge that we've written out unleashes that. And I'm going to read the charge in its entirety for everyone. The Undergraduate Student Senate shall be representative of the entire undergraduate student body and have the authority and responsibility to act on their behalf through legislative recommendations concerning campus life, academic policies and regulations, student conduct, campus and infrastructure development, student health and wellness, institutional financial planning and stewardship, matters of equity, inclusion, and access that affect student and campus environments, and the learning conditions of the undergraduate student body. Further, USS shall have the opportunity to provide programs, services, and traditions that benefit the undergraduate student body, comprised of undergraduate student leaders who are elected by their peers to represent and champion their needs, wants, and hopes for Virginia Tech. And that is the cornerstone of everything we're trying to do in USS. Now, we've intentionally left this to be sort of a broad statement so that the transition team, which includes myself and another fantastic group of student leaders, can work to fill in all of the foundations of this new entity and create it from the bottom up. So this is a charge for what we call the Commission on Undergraduate Student Affairs. And this will essentially take the place of the current Commission on Student Affairs that exists within the university governance structure. Some background on the Commission on Undergraduate Student Affairs. We need to have a unified body, but we also need to be recognized within shared governance. And having a commission is our goal to do that. Their goal is to keep it within that same system. So for clarity's sake, the Commission on Undergraduate Student Affairs is under the umbrella of the Undergraduate Student Senate, and Thomas will touch a little bit more on that later. So we've written out a charge for the CUSA as well, and I'm going to read that in its entirety in addition to the one for the USS. CUSA shall act as a repository of information, institutional history, and knowledge related to the navigation of the shared governance system at Virginia Tech. Comprised of senior leaders within the Undergraduate Student Senate, CUSA assists and mentors USS members from the inception of an idea through resolution in an effort to better the undergraduate student experience. So the key points within this charge are that these are senior leaders within the USS. They are seasoned and they understand how the USS functions. And like it says, they serve as a repository of information and history. And a big function is that they assist and mentor USS members to make sure we're making all of our members the best they can be. So we're going to keep going. One of the other things is, how do we best feel that all of this work can be done? And we think it's a combination of things. It's new thinking, new diagrams and outlines and structures, and what we think the task force has imparted upon us as important. So today for you, we have the organizational structure, and we hope to develop a full proposal and a new entity with all of the infrastructure and planning that goes on. And those are just some of the key points that you can see on the slide. There's organization structure, presence and outreach, processes, and then administrative and programmatic work. And those are just sort of the 4 key tenets of what we're doing here.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. I'll take it back over while we get started talking about the structure of what the USS will look like. Before I move forward, I want to remind you that SGA, Student Government Association, currently is built in a tricameral system. There's the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch. And along with that, outside of the SGA, there's also the CSA, Commission on Student Affairs, which acts as a legislative liaison and bureaucratic step in the current process. We are kind of revitalizing what student governance looks like, and this will be what our new plan resembles. So this is a big diagram with lots going on in it, and I'll kind of walk us through what's happening. First, I want to talk about the members. You can see there's 3 different types of senators. There are senators that emanate from the colleges. These are shown in the gray triangles. Those will be selected via their constituencies in the college through an election. The next set of senators that are important are UCSO senators. Currently, UCSOs, undergraduate chartered student organizations, or university chartered student organizations, are represented on currently the CSA. Because CSA is being brought into this new big umbrella, we're planning on bringing UCSO representation directly into the undergraduate student governance body. They will be selected via their UCSO groups, and the transition team will work on how those groups will select their senators to represent them. The last group of senators are at-large senators. These will represent all students equally. We haven't decided, and the transition team will decide how at-large senators will be selected. So if you're out there and you have a say on how this should go, we have a few options that we're kind of thinking through. One is a lottery system, which will really lower the barriers to entrance for all students to become a senator. The next is a student body wide election where students could run for at-large positions on a single issue or kind of a select few issues that they think they need to champion in the undergraduate student senate. Beyond the senators, we have an organizational structure that's kind of delineated with these dotted lines. We have 6 core administrative committees in the middle: administration, communications, accountability, staff development, appropriations, and outreach. These are collections of students that help the day-to-day functioning of the USS kind of move in a very productive way. A lot of this is kind of taken from how SGA functions now, with just some revitalization of how students are organized. The next kind of big section of this diagram are the 3 legislative groups on the outside of this diagram. There's Working Group 1, Working Group 2, and the Commission on Undergraduate Student Affairs. As Miles said earlier, the commission is underneath the umbrella of the USS, and it's made up of senators and ex officio members who represent various parts of the other parts of the university. We've left the working groups that will craft legislation on the outside purposely large, because we think it's better that we give them a wide charge in what the legislation they're supposed to write should be about, rather than make so many small committees and kind of pin them down on one specific issue. Working groups allow senators to brainstorm and collaborate in new ways. The commission, I'll go into a little bit later, but I've kind of mentioned that it's made up of senior members of the Undergraduate Student Senate. The next part I want to talk about is, the everyday student. This is only showing you about 85 students and how they participate within the organization, but what about everyday students and how do they get involved? Because they're not pictured in this diagram. There's two main ways we see students getting involved that are new to the USS. The first is a revitalized website. We think we can improve how student governance is run by making the website accessible and up to date on what the USS is doing. Students will be able to enter the website and have a really easy time accessing what's going on, what are people working on, what are the ideas that have been floated, what are the ideas that haven't been floated, and how can they do that? The second big idea of how we think students can get involved is through student forums. We envision twice a semester students being able to sign up to present ideas either individually or in a group to either the entire Senate or a smaller group of the Senate. Ideally, the working groups would be involved. And this would create a bridge between the everyday student issues and what the USS is working on. We think that should happen twice a semester or around there so that the USS is constantly up to date with the student condition. Also, this doesn't seem very fluid, but hopefully as the presentation goes on, we can show how these groups aren't really limiting. We're trying not to limit students in where we put them in the organization. We're trying to kind of strategize how students can best be applied, their strengths can best be applied. Lastly, I want to talk about the Appropriations Committee. So a big part of kind of student leadership and student governance at Virginia Tech is student finance, the student activity fee. So students are given a portion of the student activity fee to disseminate to registered student organizations. Currently, that process is done through something called the Student Budget Board, which is sat underneath CSA. But as I said before, CSA is kind of being engulfed in this new organization and SBB along with it, the Student Budget Board. We are transforming the Student Budget Board into the Appropriations Committee. One of the strong pieces of feedback I've received from students, especially students involved in the Student Budget Board currently, is that the people that are assigned to work on the Student Budget Board aren't necessarily the best people for the job or the people that even want the job. We think assigning a group of 8 to 10 senators for the Appropriations Committee is a new way to think of how the student activity fee can be disseminated amongst students and keeping that mission really core to the USS. That's a really important role that the USS needs to function. And there's so many things that needs to happen to make this organization work well. That's why we think this is reflected in the complexity of the body that we've built, but also how it can be simplified from the current status. So now I want to move on to something I really love is the floor plan. In the previous diagram, there's lots of lines separating senators. We want to suggest in this image here that it is one body that works in a fluid manner and can connect together. So one of the features of the current system that we're changing in this is that we're not separating students into different groups. So there's no executive branch that doesn't meet with a legislative branch, that doesn't meet with a judiciary branch. Currently, those students are really difficult to get together in one room because they just have missions that send them into other places. With the USS, we want to bring students into one room where they can interact with the public, with the media, with special guests, with their leadership to best serve students and to best represent them to the larger university. From this, continuing with the structure, I want to zoom in on the executive portion, kind of the executive cabinet, if you will, of the USS. This is a bigger change from the current SGA model. SGA currently has a president and one vice president, a secretary, and some other leaders as well. We're taking a lot of the roles that are not vice presidential roles at the moment and raising them up to vice presidential roles. So there is the president of the Senate who will be kind of the most public, outward-facing representative of the body to the university, to students, and also to the public and to the state of Virginia. We have 5 vice presidents. The first 2 are mainly legislative. The first one will be in charge of making sure the working groups are working well. The second one is the vice president for shared governance and will be in charge of and chair the Commission on Undergraduate Student Affairs, another very important leadership position to recognize shared governance. The third vice presidential role would be the VP for administration, in charge of 5 of those 6 committees in the core of the diagram I showed you earlier. And there are directors that kind of serve as in-betweens of how those committees run, and the vice president and how they can serve as a student leader. VP4 is the VP for finance, in charge of the Appropriations Committee and Hockey Effect, another very important role. Lastly is the VP and representative to the Board of Visitors. Currently, our undergraduate representative to the Board of Visitors doesn't need to get involved with student governance at all. It's really up to their individual choice how much they kind of coordinate with student governance at the moment. We want to solidify that formal relationship between our representative to the Board of Visitors and student governance and the representativeness of the one body. The last important point I'll talk about is that all of these positions will be paid. That is a new idea that's common amongst our peer universities, but it has not been tried yet at Virginia Tech. And we think to create equal access to these positions for all types of students, making them paid and stipend will allow all students to get involved in leadership in student governance when before they could not because of mainly financial reasons. Next, I would like to do a zoom in on the commission. The commission is a very special body, and the transition team will be working on defining more specifically how it will function and what it will do. I can tell you broadly, it will have equal representation from the 3 different types of student senators. As you can see here, there's 12 represented, and then there's also 11 or 12 kind of changes sometimes. Ex officio members who are representatives, vice presidents, vice provosts, members from the faculty senate, the staff senate, and also AP faculty from the Division of Student Affairs, and many more people that help connect these students who are serving leadership positions within the Senate to the institutional knowledge that's really important. We don't want students to create an idea that they have a lot of force behind and bring it to levels in which it might get shot down because the idea has already been drafted before, or shared governance is not the way to go about doing it. We need to work with a very particular office. That knowledge, that experience with the university is going to be passed through the commission to the rest of the undergraduate student senate, and that's part of the flow of information and of legislation that will happen in this new body. Next, I want to focus on how these students will serve as mature and curious leaders. They will serve as peer mentors and trainers for the other working groups as they draft legislation. And because we want them to have that role, we think that we should require these students to have already served a year in the Undergraduate Student Senate before they are selected or allowed to be on the Commission for Undergraduate Student Affairs. We also think that they should have a longer term, either 2 or 3 years. The transition team will work that out with a little bit more detail, but allowing students on the commission to serve a term that is longer than the normal 1 year will give them the opportunity to not have to compete to return to the commission, but kind of establish a leadership position that's outside of the presidents and vice presidents that really recognizes shared governance and how we can work as a community together with all the different constituency groups at the university to create positive change. And that process will work, I think, via invitation for the term limits, but that's something that the transition team will work out in a little bit more detail. Next is the big picture. So how does the Senate fit within the governance structure of Virginia Tech? So this is a lot of stuff that the everyday student doesn't really get in contact with. But hopefully senators and the students they interact with will get that picture in this new body. So the Undergraduate Student Senate you can see here is in the center, and the commission is literally within it. That's a really important kind of visual cue. There's also the Graduate and Professional Student Senate and their respective commission within them as well. Those connect directly to the University Council. Right now, the Commission on Student Affairs has to look over all legislation that is proposed by SGA or GSA. This new system will have a direct connection to what's called University Council, which is the main deciding council. About 70 or 80 people are on that from all over the university that make decisions on legislation before it goes to the president and then eventually the BOV if need be. Another important kind of formal yet informal connector here is the Student Governance Leadership Council. Currently, there is an ad hoc kind of informal group that comes together of people that are really engaged in leadership in these two groups. But we want to establish that, make that very clear in this new model. We're bringing together the leadership, the presidents and vice presidents of both of the student senates, so our voices can be heard together, and we can align our goals where they need to be aligned. And also talk about disagreements where undergraduates are not seeing the bigger picture of how things are impacted by graduate students as well. So I've been talking for quite a bit about the structure and I might have lost some of you. So I want to bring you back to our vision. Our vision is about connecting students in successful ways and establishing service leadership positions within the Senate that help that unified voice come to fruition. This video is from Leeds University in the UK. It really shows that more personal level of how our vision is enacted on the day-to-day. We will make our own video. The transition team will be working on that over the summer. So it's a little bit more hokey quality, but this really gets across our vision. So I'll stop talking and I'll play the video.
Leeds University Union is a member-led organisation. That means that any one of our 38,000 members can make a change to what we do, how we do it, and who represents them. If enough of our members want something to change, then we change it. But if you've got a bright spark that you think can change your union, university, or Leeds for the better, how do you get the ball rolling? Let's start with your idea. You go to Common Ground for your usual drink, but get served with a single-use cup. Wouldn't it be great if all our outlets served drinks in reusable cups instead? The next stop is our website at luu.org.uk. Here you read a bit more about how you can make change, see what ideas are up for discussion, or have a look at current policy and see what progress we're making. Next up, you want to go and have a chat with our political engagement team, a friendly bunch who you can find up on level 1 of our union building, opposite the activities office. They'll be able to chat through your idea with you, check that nobody else has proposed it, and let you know what to do next. Then it's forum time. The Better Forums take place 3 times a year, and there are 3 groups of people at each forum, each with their own role in the decision-making process. You'll need to be there to tell people why you submitted your idea and how you think it will benefit students. There'll be reps who will relay their students' views and give feedback on ideas. And finally, there's a randomly selected panel of 16 students who will listen, ask questions, and decide whether to approve or reject your idea. If 75% of them vote yes, great. If it's a no, you might have to rethink your idea or have a chat with our members to see why they voted it down. And if the panel is split, it's referendum time, where the entire student body will have the chance to vote on your idea. The good news is that the panel loved your idea and voted yes. You've done it. You've made a positive impact on your union, university, or Leeds. And it all started with an idea. Who knows what you'll do next? Leeds University.
Okay, I love that video because it really gets across a lot of things that is core to our mission in the task force, in the transition team, and to the Undergraduate Student Senate as a whole. It really shows that personal connection to how students can be engaged within the structure and the organization, but also without. So kind of coming full circle, how does this plan connect us to our big 3 goals that we stated at the beginning: accessibility, approachability, and representativeness? So accessibility to everyday students to create change and to see that change become a reality is critical to how the USS will be seen by students and how it will function for students. And we think several parts of our plan have addressed making student governance more accessible, either via a lottery or student forums or an online kind of access portal. A lot of ideas can increase accessibility. Second is approachability. Clarity and transparency for students. Working with the USS should be clear, integrity-driven, kind, and uncomplicated. These are really core tenets to how we can get students engaged and positively driven, engage with the university and changing the university to what they think should be the new vision, the new Virginia Tech. Lastly is representativeness and democracy. It's not something I talk about frequently in this presentation, but democracy, again, a core tenet of what USS needs to be. It's ideal for making a group that is representative and equitable to all students, bringing students in via UCSO senators, also through kind of lowering the bar for students' entrance, but not lowering our expectations for their service. Also, lastly, making sure that leadership positions are affordable and accessible to students who might not be able to afford spending that much time in a leadership role. So that's kind of the wrap up of the presentation. There's a few more slides that are going to talk about the transition team. They're really going to be building the Constitution, bylaws, position descriptions, and the election code and processes. Kind of getting a little bit deeper into the grits of how this is gonna work. Also making sure that students will be engaged coming this fall. That brings me to the next slide, which is our timeline. We've had our applications opened in February, and they closed earlier in March, and the transition team has been working already on making sure we're getting this transition going as smoothly and as quickly as possible. So SGA will formally phase out, kind of sunset, at the end of this semester. And then at the beginning of the fall, we will be working hard on getting the elections up. In the first week of October, elections will be held. And then we can really start getting students moving in this new organization. So that is the extent of the presentation. One more slide about the membership of the task force. The task force had its last official meeting last week or the week before, I can't quite remember. And we'll be meeting once more to build a report that will be accessible to everyone for what we see should be the big kind of guiding force and tenets to this change of student governance for graduate students and also here for undergraduate students. So I'll open the floor to questions, comments, concerns. I'll stop my share so I can see what's going on. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Heather, for adding that. So anyone have any questions about, that was a longer presentation, but lots of great ideas in it. Thank you for those nice chat comments. I appreciate it. This is not our first time giving this presentation, I'll tell you that.
You all may have touched on this a little bit, but just curious, as you look forward into the future, what are you most excited about with all these changes? I'm excited about it, so I'd love to hear what you all are thinking about.
Miles, do you want to take that one? You're a little bit more prepared for the future.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for that question. So just a little bit of context, I served in SGA. I've been serving since my freshman year. So this is closing out my second year in the organization. And I think one of the things that I'm most excited for going into the USS is not only the structural change, just the way we're going to be doing things will be different, but I think an attitudinal change that will come at the highest level. And we will be incorporating students from all across campus and, like I said, approachability, accessibility, representativeness. And I think what I'm most excited for is structural change combined with attitudinal change within the organization. And we're having students and representatives who are truly impassioned about the work they're doing within the organization, in addition to the student body who's impassioned about the work we're doing within the organization, and connecting it back to make it like my favorite phrase is bi-directional information flow. Students talking to representatives, representatives talking to students. That's what I think I'm most excited about, is structural and attitudinal change within the organization.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I've served as kind of an outside counsel in the task force for a student perspective. I've never participated in SGA before. And, this opportunity presented to us to totally revitalize and regenerate what student governance looks like on the whole, totally redesigning the system is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I've presented this presentation to student affairs leaders from universities all across Virginia. And it's been kind of widely accepted as a fantastic opportunity. One, for the kind of the whole university to get kind of a reset and an opportunity to start over on, really representing people in proper ways. Secondly is, as Miles said, getting the regular student involved. For a long time, I was the regular student. I did not have the information to give a presentation on student governance. But, the more I learned and the more I became invested in serving my community through this, I think, this plan really provides that space for all students to get involved. Thank you, Lindsay, for that question. That was a fantastic question. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your answers. I appreciate it.
Well, if there are no other questions from this group, I don't want to rush anyone. But if there are no other questions, I'd love for everyone to join me in thanking Thomas and Miles for this wonderful presentation. And folks out there joining us from the recording, please feel free, if you have any questions, to send those our way. USS@vt.edu should be an active email any day now. And so we look forward to receiving your questions, and we'll do our very best to have answers. We also do plan on keeping the transition team website up to date with all the great work that the transition team is doing. So we are starting from day one with transparency and wanting to include folks in the process. And I'm so proud of Thomas and Miles and the 11 members of the transition team alongside Miles. This is going to be a fantastic journey and a wonderful thing for our institution and our undergraduate and graduate students, as the graduate students also journey on building their Senate as well. So thank you again, Thomas and Miles. Thanks to the great group here who joined us, and anyone who's watching after the fact. The future is bright. So thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.